Hey everybody, Colleen Long here with the Adventum Mindfulness Triathlon. And as you know, this year we are doing it virtually. So we are bringing you all these amazing mental health experts and we're doing talks. And today I'm so excited to introduce you to David Bidler. He is someone that I've been following for quite some time on Instagram. He is a coach, an ultra runner. He is an author and an educator. And I really appreciate all of David's works. He's got lots of organizations that he's heading up. He's very mission minded. He has a passion for mental health, and especially with talking to youth about mental health tools and what we could do now, especially during COVID, because we need all the mental health resources that we can get. And so I'm excited for you to meet David today for our conversation. We're going to be talking about athletes and mental health, endurance athletes in particular, the endurance of life. We're going to talk about youth mental health, the importance of nasal breathing, and he's going to talk about his book too, Breathe to Perform. This is a fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough. I read through it. I have highlighted a majority of the book because there's so many awesome tools in there. So without further ado, Coach David, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us and sharing with what you're doing with the Distance Project, Physiology First, and Breathe to Perform. So welcome.
Colleen, I could not be more honored to talk with you. I've been watching your work since we first connected, and everything that you're doing is such an inspiration. So it feels really great to get to dive in and go deep with you on some of these topics.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I've been looking forward to it.
Me too.
Well, thank you. And so if you can, please share your story. I think everyone's story is so powerful and it really humanizes the work that we do, right? I mean, there's always a reason why we do something that we do. And I know that you have a very phenomenal journey. I mean, you have really made your way in a sense. I mean, with what life, how it came to you, and then where you are today. It's just amazing to see the resilience that you have in your life. So if you can, please share a little bit about your story.
Sure. You know, well, I got interested in a lot of this work before I knew that I was interested in it. You know, I was a young person dealing with a ton of stress, a ton of anxiety, and knowing nothing about my body and my brain and how certain behaviors can help me leverage certain mental states. No idea. And growing up, you know, a standard diet of Coca-Cola, Elio's Pizza, you know, the whole deal, right? And that ultimately turned into a diet of Newport cigarettes and Old English malt liquor and all things that put me in a absolutely terrible mind-body state. And I remember that experience and how dark it felt from within that sort of physiological cave, with no light, no way to understand how I could navigate a change of perspective, a change in my body and brain that was really profound, that would ultimately become life-changing. And when I talked with people growing up about these concepts, people would obviously notice what I was going through when I was young. I left school in the 8th grade, sort of a circuitous and unconventional path towards where I sort of ended up. Mm-hmm. People noticed the struggles I was going through. But the conversations around these struggles were not ever diving into the underlying physiological mechanisms that should make somebody feel pretty damn stressed, exhausted, and anxious. Yeah. And I remember as a young kid, when we would talk and someone would talk with me about these concepts of mental health, just being somewhat aware of the questions that weren't being asked. Mm-hmm. How critical, you know, these questions obviously were to the process or to this puzzle of a young person feeling really anxious, depressed, and stressed, and wondering, well, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? What assessments can we do to make sure that mental well-being is even physiologically possible for you? What are the physiological prerequisites that make mental well-being even possible? And I got really interested in my own sort of journey as a friend of mine in my late teens, when I was really at the kind of the height of living a destructive lifestyle, dragged me into this jiu-jitsu gym, you know, and I made every excuse in the world not to go to this place. Supposedly it's way too busy, right? But
yeah.
To do. I can't possibly carve out the time to go and do this jiu-jitsu thing. And I completely got my ass handed to me. Walked in and was just thrown over every 6.5 foot dude choked out by everybody left and right. And in that moment of my first night, in not only this whole new kind of fitness environment, because I'd never done any sports, any kind of training, but it was also a completely contrarian cultural environment to the one that I was sort of inhabiting, hanging out with a bunch of people, smoking, drinking, all falling into sort of the depths of what that lifestyle produces mentally. And then seeing this completely like counterculture of people who were obviously taking care of themselves in a different way. They just sort of were more vibrant. They radiated a kind of positivity and life that felt exciting. And it was on display. And then watching the physical differences. I remember, I'll never forget having to tap out of a hold that first night, simply because I couldn't breathe. I wasn't in any specific like submission hold. There was like somebody just kind of on me, and I was like, I quit. And they were like, and I remember thinking at that age, like, this dude just asked me if I'm sure if I quit. This is not who I want to be, and with that model right in front of me of an alternative culture that I really did not know existed, and the opportunity to get a taste of it. I just never went back. I just wanted another taste. And I remember saying, how do I sign up for this place? How do I come here? And wanting to be there every night. And that journey led me ultimately to find a love for endurance distance running and ultra marathon running. And it led to the birth of the Distance Project, which is the gym that I run. And that sort of led into these offshoots of wanting to better understand our bodies, brains, and minds in the 21st century.
And what do you see with your athletes that you coach? Is there like a common denominator when it comes to mental health? Are there, not to stereotype athletes, but what is something common that you see when it comes to mental health in athletes?
Well, it's really interesting because I don't know that we have very common people here who find this space. We all walked into this endurance world. And I think maybe we were expecting, I don't know, maybe some kind of a stereotypical picture that really didn't exist. Like the endurance world is a strange world. It really is, right? It honest to God is. And I think that when we categorize people as athletes, it's really important to start to look at these different kinds of athleticism. And what are modalities that can feed certain dysfunction? And how do we be more honest within our communities as to whether what we're doing is actually mentally healthy or whether there's another driver that pushes us to want to explore these particular things? So in the endurance community, I ran into a ton of folks who were dealing with incredibly deep underlying issues with depression, issues with anxiety. There's a lot of reasons that drive somebody to want to be out in the woods for 5 hours. 10 hours, 24 hours alone, right? And a lot of different people are practicing endurance sports. So I don't know, and I'd love to dive into this with you. I don't know that we know as a nation and as a people and as a culture what mental health might even mean. I've never heard a working definition of this word that let us build a training system to better understand it. I think that maybe we all sort of silently think that perhaps we're the archetype of it, right? Mentally healthy, right? And what about everybody else? And we haven't had a conversation yet on what that term even means. So when we talk about mental health, we talk a lot at the training center, at the Distance Project here, about physiology. We talk about states. We talk about anxiety. We talk about stress, what these are prompts for in the human body. We talk about behaviors. We talk about perspective. And all of those are distinct rabbit holes, tunnels of conversation worth exploring for quite a while. And one thing I love that you're doing is we work to bring more awareness to these terms. It's going to be a time when we have to look at ourselves, I think, as a nation and say depression rates are rising, anxiety rates are rising, suicide, especially among youth, particularly after COVID, is rising. What does this signify, and how do we talk about it in a way that's not only under the banner of mental health, but look at the underlying biology and physiology, and then sort of ask the critical question in the room, which is what is predominantly physiologically driven? what do we make of being in a new era of science, where we know more through the lens of neuroscience and stress physiology than we ever have about what drives the mind? And how do we have a really new feeling, positive, proactive conversation about these things? So our conversations at the Distance Project are pretty nuanced around working to understand behaviors, physiology, biology, perspective, and then taking a real honest look at the external world around us and working to have very deep and honest conversations about where all these places intersect.
Yeah, I appreciate what you do, especially with youth. You give great examples of, hey, if I drink a cup of coffee and then I'm about to drink another cup of coffee, and then now I have 7 cups of coffee or 8 cups of coffee, and you ask them, what do you think I'm going to be feeling like? So you address that with like overstimulation and like what we're putting into our body and all these things. And what I again appreciate with you and your approach of evidence-based, science-based, that your body's actually doing what it's designed to do, and that there's not necessarily anything wrong with you, it's upregulated. So when you're having all these symptoms that your body should have, if it's being overstimulated, or you're ingesting certain things, and then you're creating these chemicals and all that. So I'm glad that you're able to break it down, because I think when you're able to use science and break it down, you can make the distinction between what's happening and then the story, like you were talking about. You're creating perspective, like, hey, let's step back a little bit and let's see where you and in that, which I love your approach too, you show empathy. Right? You're not judging, you're pushing like, hey, I get it, and then you're also empowering the person. You're saying, hey, let's take a step back here. This isn't you, but I can see why you're behaving that way. And hey, let's give you some tools so you can address it.
But there's a couple pieces that I'd love to unpack with you there, because I think that they're really critical. And one is, what creates the stories that people are telling about the world around them and the world within them. Mm-hmm. What are the frameworks for these stories? We have this idea of this rise in disorders and mental health disorders, and young people being told that they have a disorder at this age and that age, and that becomes a very heavy weight, and it becomes a very, very focused story around physiological reactions and physiological reactivity. And often when we're working with young people, they've already been diagnosed with several disorders. Yeah. But no one's really worked with them to understand, and they've put it in the box of a disorder, something's wrong with me. Yeah. What we love to dive into with them is, what do you think should happen in this environment, this highly stimulating environment? Mm-hmm. Based on the behaviors that you're currently engaging in, the things that you're doing, what should be the net physiological result? So I can often say to young people, imagine we had like a laboratory rat, and we began to stimulate that rat, to shine bright lights in its face. You start to reduce its sleep. What would be the net physiological result of that? Yeah. And we can guarantee that, if we can look at ourselves objectively that way, mm-hmm. we can start to recognize that behaviors have reactions and that the body has our best interest in mind. Yeah. Anxiety is not a punishment. These are not punishments. These are prompts. Yes. Our ability to really tune in and listen to what they might be prompting, I think, is heightened when it's not distorted by stories that we're being told about being broken or disordered. And I think that that's a critical part of the empowerment piece that you talked about. How does this become an empowering conversation to engage in? Because I think it certainly can be.
Absolutely, because sometimes, what comes with depression? Hopelessness, right? Despair, where you're like, I give up. I'm tired. I want it to stop. And all these things. And when you feel like you don't have tools, who wouldn't feel helpless? And so I'm really like your book, for example, an amazing introduction to basic breathing tools that are not basic as in, not to say that the level of effectiveness isn't very high. We both know how hugely important breathing is, but it's awesome that, giving people simple tools that have huge effects, positive effects on their physiology. Like you said, that will help empower them. And so when it comes to, and there's so much I want to touch on with breath work and nasal breathing, and but to touch on with athletes, how do you incorporate that in your training? Because I don't think a lot of coaches do that, where they incorporate the breath work into the training to help them optimize as an athlete in life in general.
Well, I'll circle to a place where we can tie in both parts of that conversation in terms of the mental health, how we talk about it, and then what tools we give that we apply to our training. So, I think that a piece of language that I hope gets to be more popular, whether it's this exact piece of language or the concept at whole, is the idea of physiological resonance. What does it feel like when you're in a state of physiological resonance? If I was having this conversation with you right now, my heart rate was pegged, that, my pupils were dilated and I was visibly, sweating. That'd be an interesting kind of far end of the spectrum of physiological resonance. We have these other metrics for when something is close to optimal. And in the athletic world, we have them a lot. We talk about strength, not in a vague and abstract way. We have some benchmarks that we measure. In the fitness world, you have some benchmarks that you measure for health and fitness and performance to help people understand their own body and where it would optimally be given the environment that they were in. You could have them trace that back to this idea of resonance. Where should I be if I'm about to speak on a stage? Where should I be if I'm on an assault bike? Where should I be at the last 400 meters of a 5K time trial? Where should I be when I'm driving my car and somebody else cuts me off in traffic? And if people can begin to think of themselves with that physiology first sort of mentality and baseline, then they can begin to look at the small problems that we create on purpose in the gym as these opportunities to train for the bigger challenges of life. So we're constantly looking at the gym and training as an actual analog for training for the world around us. We say, I'm not interested, I'm interested in the sport of life. And to tie that into the athletic mental health piece, I know what it feels like to be in this world where your world has gotten very, very small and nothing but the race or the competition or the ultra marathon season matters.
Yes.
And that's a pretty good inlet into whether maybe you are running from something as opposed to running for something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I don't know that we've been honest enough about that in the ultra distance world.
Yeah.
The athletes that I have at our gym here, they're thinking long game. They want to be doing this when they're 80 years old. They want to be feeling better every year. And less important than whether they can show their 100-mile belt buckle on Instagram and get all of that dopamine and all of that social approval and all of that gratification. More important to them is, did I do that with a great level of agency? Was I present? Did I follow my game plan? Is this sport thing actually an analog for life and my bigger goals and mission, the things I'm working to do? Or is it an escape from my life?
Yeah.
If we can, I think, have that conversation at a very honest base level, then we can begin to design training programs that are healthy. Because if an athlete is running to escape their life and they come to me as a coach and I say, well, I'll just give you more miles every week.
Yeah.
Why don't I just give you more time out there? I hope that solves, instead of literally asking, hey, how are your friendships? What are the quality of your conversations? How often are you honest with other people? How often are you challenged by the people in your circle? What are you doing from this and that perspective around body, brain, and mind? And if there are pieces of the puzzle missing, well, that's what they would hire a coach for, is to be the person who gets honest with them and then throw them into this arena of other thinking people who are also ready to be honest. From that perspective, then we can take them through an exercise. We can have them look at a workout that we've drawn on the board. And there's, on any given night here, there's a group of people sitting around a circle trying to decipher the scribbling that I put on the board, which is a challenge in of itself that would require regulation. And then once they figure out what the hell I'm asking them to do, I can ask them, like, what's your game plan? There's clearly like 5 or 6 things on the board. Maybe they're things that you've interfaced with before. Maybe some of them are new. But I want you to talk me through your strategy and what you plan to do from the standpoint of mindset, from the standpoint of breath, from the standpoint of aerobic and anaerobic, capacity. Like, how do you see this going down? And they'll give me their playbook. And then we'll throw ourselves into the actual intensity of the experience. Just like life, sometimes you get punched in the face. Sometimes the game plan didn't unfold the way that you hoped that it would. We can debrief that experience. and then hopefully have left, obviously, fitter. You know what I mean? Like fitness is like the base level, low level, easier to attain thing. If you continue to pick up weights and put them down, and you get your heart up, and you'll end up a fit human being.
Yeah.
One thing that we learned through the Distance Project is that physical fitness does not equate at any point to mental well-being, to fulfillment.
Yes.
So all of these higher order things, that you just become a fitter version of the exact same person that you were mentally and emotionally in a lot of ways. And so we want to make sure that when we talk about training for life, it isn't for us just an interesting and popular hashtag.
Yeah.
Actually an approach to saying this is an environment where we'll leverage the opportunity to learn with each other. And then we'll take that out in the world and ask, who am I? What am I trying to do? And can I take these skills outside of the gym? So that's ultimately the breathing exercises and things that we do in here are really a training environment to do them elsewhere, like in those big moments when the rubber hits the road outside us. It's a sort of training environment when you're in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've said before that you cannot run your way to mental health.
It's the real deal, and it is a great example, I think, of a thing we're all facing right now, probably more than ever, which is our worlds get too small. We're just too small. I mean, Instagram does it to us, Facebook does it with us, right? And I say with us because we're also engaging. There's a culture sort of blaming social media, and I'm thinking, I gave them permission. I signed a contract that said, okay, a full agency there. We were exchanging data and attention for a platform, a microphone, connection, whatever we wanted. We're making an exchange there, right? And, I think ultimately, just 1 second. I think ultimately, as our worlds get tiny and the algorithms show us exactly what we clicked on last, and we hear every conversation that confirms our current biases and our view of the world, and it feeds us the things that we want to hear and want to see, we begin to think that this tiny box is in fact the larger reality. And in every community that I've integrated in, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and ultra running, whatever it might be, I work to remain very aware of that. To a great mentor of mine that I ran into when I was young and looking for mentors, and glad that I found this person, he said, the ability to watch from the stands, just one step away. Yourself, your decisions, your behaviors, your life, that's a skill that you have to cultivate. I really took that to heart. As someone who did not go through the school path, I always took what mentors said to heart. To walk into an environment like the ultra running world and say, hey, there's a lot of cool stuff happening here. I love ultra running. It's like my passion.
Yeah.
But the box is really, really small. And when you start to bring in other things, and I remember there's a time not that long ago, probably still is true to some degree, where like strength training was like a radical idea.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, wow, I'm a runner. I don't do that. And whenever we start to hear these labels, I'm a runner, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm a blank, you recognize that the world around that person is shrinking, and that what we're probably hungry for is identity. It feels good to say I'm a something. And it feels good to say I'm a something with others who are like you.
Yeah.
We tried to do with the Distance Project. If you actually I hope one day you get to visit this base. The thing I'm proudest of is nobody's like each other. I have athletes in their 80s who just, been on this incredible journey. They're in here doing deadlifts.
I love it. Yeah.
Everybody. We have teenagers who train here. We have folks who, when you walk in here, nobody looks the same. It's not a clique, And when you can get to that, what you get are people who challenge each other's perspectives in a very honest way, coming from different vantage points in the world. And it's wonderfully destructive and disruptive. Because if you begin to fall into a myth of some sort and confuse it with a larger reality, somebody will call you out on the BS, and you get to take a look at the world around you and say, well, what do we know about the external world? Not from a standpoint of like limbic system hijacking and emotionality. What do I know about my body and my brain? What do they need to be in a state that's optimal?
Yeah.
And kind of build systems around this stuff that we can notice when we're not feeling our best and say, wait, there are things I can probably trace that back to. And on the other side of the coin, there are active steps that I can take to leverage feeling awesome so I can get back to the thing I'm actually looking to do in the world.
Yeah. And it sounds like too, with everything that you're saying, and obviously we're huge fans, and we very much believe in the power of exercise, movement, and physical activity. But we also know it can be a two-edged sword sometimes. And I relate too, where I was a collegiate athlete, and you just have to get to a place where you got to perform, and you just have to push through. And rest was for people who are weak, and or like even mentally, or the stress. You're like, I got to push through. I got to push through, and it's really easy to kind of find yourself lost, and that could be anything, not just athlete. This isn't to pick on athletes,
But
but
it's fun, right? Because you get this neurological reward from
yeah,
athleticism. It's
yeah,
the most
totally.
addictive thing in the world as well. So you get this other driver. You
Yes.
say, wait, when I poke that button, I get the juice.
Mm-hmm.
I want to poke that button again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how many other buttons also give you juice? Because if you
Yeah.
have a bunch of buttons that give you juice, you have a very diversified life, do a lot of stuff. But if all
Yeah.
you have is a button, what happens if the juice doesn't come one day?
Yeah.
You watch an athlete who maybe got injured, had one button to get all of these.
Mm-hmm.
For one, the neurochemical cocktail that puts them in a state of flow where they feel at peace in their body and the world.
Mm-hmm.
Two, their social outlet gets taken away.
Yeah.
Three, their mechanism for actually staying physically fit.
Yeah.
The way that they spend their Sunday, it all goes away.
Yeah.
With me or something happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then you watch that person maybe fall out of their own community because that was
Yeah.
the one way to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch them often, share the experience of depression, anxiety, isolation, alienation that happens until they're back on track.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I think that the larger conversation then becomes, why am I doing endurance sports? And how many places do I find flow
Yeah.
in my life? How many places am I fully present, very engaged, where time is timeless?
Yeah.
Wait, if I have friendships and good conversations and moments and access portals,
Mm-hmm.
then endurance running is something I love to do, as are all these other things. And then I think that becomes a path towards mental well-being that isn't predicated on one modality.
Yeah, you have to like diversify your mental health tools in a way. I mean, like everything you're talking about really points back to we can't do this by ourselves. Like we need community. And like you said, if there's an injury or something that comes up, or even if you're on that ultra run, I mean, if you see like you have the pacer, you have someone cheering on or handing you, whatever your drink or whatever, like you need that. Like you need that to keep going. In the gym, like having someone just that the fun competitive, like other people cheering you on, like
Oh my God. Yeah, 100%. One of the story, think of stories and narratives. One story that we push back on a lot, very openly here and online, wherever possible, is this absolutely BS narrative that we are rugged individualists and rugged individuals who are just going to solo troop through life. And I'd like to have a conversation on what are the social prerequisites for mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
We can kind of look at our history and the way that we commune, and the way that we collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can understand that, we can make that really scary leap. But think of how scared I was walking in the jiu-jitsu gym for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think of how scared people are walking in here for the first time.
Oh, sure.
Very tuned into that. It's not easy making these changes. So your point that you brought up right before you talked specifically about athletes was the point of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one thing I think that's lacking that could be a bridge, but is instead a chasm, is ultimately this curse of knowledge that you see so many people fall into the depths of. The moment that they learn a thing, in their mind, that thing has now suddenly become common knowledge to everybody. And everyone is an absolute idiot for not what they learned this morning.
Yeah.
Take that kind of posture.
Yeah.
And they live on this finger pointing pedestal. Yeah. And the knowledge, the skill, the thing that you were so excited that you learned, it doesn't get transferred. It gets kind of hoarded.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if our work is about anything, it's about building those bridges over these chasms. Mm-hmm. Saying if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you can't explain it. You know what I mean? If you can't say it simply, maybe there's a reason that you're not, because this is not that complex. It's actually very simple. Mm-hmm. And what we wanted to share in the book and through the other things is this is really an example of the Pareto's principle. It is an 80-20 ratio. 20% of changes make 80% of impact, and then you can dive into the minutia forever.
Mm-hmm.
But the public at large doesn't know the 20%.
Yeah.
We presented to hundreds of kids in the past year, all different ages. This is the first time that they've had a conversation about basic breath education or anything related to physiological state management. And so our goal is to hopefully embed that into the infrastructure of educational curriculum and make sure that these conversations aren't happening on another planet.
Yes,
and that all of us can maintain some contact with reality and actually get into our communities and have straightforward talk.
Yeah. And I love what you're doing in both worlds. At the Distance Project, in your gym, you're spreading awareness, whether it's mental health or the fact of what is your intention in working out, like in a way to help them kind of wake up. Like, are you doing this to go through the motions, or are you running away from something? And these are healthy questions to ask. It's not meant to challenge the person in a way to to discourage them, but it's just like, hey, let's just stop and pause, which is something that we don't always do. Stop and pause and let's be aware and kind of take in what's going on, and again, make those distinctions from the story and create perspective. And just to kind of transition to the youth, how do you do that with Physiology First? And when you come and go to the school and talk to youth, how do you give our audience a little bit of a breakdown of what that looks like?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry for the background noise there. I'm going to give it just a second. Again, the gym itself is next to an active boat yard, so there's always
things. It's okay.
So we'll give them just a second to kind of clear out. So we initially started talking to young folks here at the gym. We had teams that were coming in, and the conversations that we were having around anxiety and stress were really profound, and they were coming to us from the kids more than ever. People were very open to saying, look, I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety, very stressed. We'd love to ask students, like in seminars, who thinks that stress and anxiety are like major problems? And every hand goes up. No matter the size of the seminar, everybody thinks they're major problems. So then we can ask them, who here can, define stress or anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always this sort of quiet moment where all hands go down. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, we're talking about this nebulous abstract. How will we build a tangible solution, like a proactive thing that you can do? Because if stress and anxiety, there's these sort of dark clouds that hang over the conversation. It's very different than saying, well, what do I know about my body when I feel anxious? What is it trying to drive and prompt? So when we talk with young folks, which nowadays is either in in-person seminars, which is less due to COVID, but that's what we're doing predominantly, large webinars with entire schools, meaning the students, the faculty, and the parents, and a digital curriculum that we're ultimately going to open source so that any teacher can take this material into their schools. The questions that we want to ask are always preceded, by the kind of buy-in, the real buy-in that student's going to need in order to hear this information. Mm-hmm. It's preceded by the following two sort of narrative tools. And if we can't succeed in getting them to care, we might as well just not have the seminar, because otherwise it's simply self-congratulatory.
Yeah.
Right? If I have 14 kids on a phone and I'm just going off about hemoglobin, I missed something. So the ways that we like to do this is, one, in all of these different seminars, I love to have students engage in a little bit of visualization. Mm-hmm. And I've had some really tough kids in some really tough neighborhoods do this. This is not just if you think that this can't work where you are, no matter who's watching this, it absolutely can. I'll tell the kids, like, look, hey, I want to run I want to get to an experiment with you guys. Would people be down to just take a minute and lie down or sit down and just relax, mm-hmm. and take that time to visualize the most awesome, fulfilled, happy, rocking version of your future that you can dream up? And you don't have to report it back to me. You don't have to tell anybody. It's just for you. Would people be down to do that for a minute? And in every scenario, there's actually no resistance at all. Kids are like, I will. They're exhausted. They're exhausted and they're tasked, and everything's like a data pull.
Yeah.
So I tell them there's no report back.
Yeah.
They'll down. They'll sit up. God knows where they went, but I tell them, really feel out where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And when they sit back up, we'll remind them everything that we're about to share is simply a tool to help you get there.
Yeah.
A place that you were trying to go.
Yeah.
And that because we work with some high performers in all these different realms of life, we know what it takes and we know what it looks like. And we know what it is like for the person who actually gets there and is living that version of their life, or some obviously shifted version of it, because our visions change as we grow. And we know that not everybody does. There is a skill set, an inherent skill set to meeting the barriers and barricades and challenges that are going to be between where you are now and where you want to go. And this whole seminar is simply about giving you those skills. It is simply about giving you those tools. If you want those tools, if you want to dig into the toolbox, tune in to what I'm about to say, dive into the material and take what you want and use it to get where you want to go. And that immediately becomes a mechanism to tell them, I'm not some dude who's coming in to tell you that you look stressed. You got some stressed.
Yeah.
Messed up. We can let them know why it would matter to manage stress and anxiety more effectively. And then we'll run this short thought exercise with them. I'd love to share it with you because it gives them an opportunity to vocalize some of what we're hoping that they come to realize through the seminar. We give them a mechanism to come to that conclusion themselves without us just throwing it on them.
Yes, yeah.
So the exercise is this. We'll ask students in almost all scenarios lately. We'll say, look, I want you to run this thought exercise with me. Imagine that all of us were immortal gods. We're immortal gods. We live forever and we can have anything at the snap of the fingers. We can have any experience. We can go anywhere. We can access anything for all of eternity with all power, right? How long would that take before you were bored out of your mind? But how long would it take? We don't have 1,000 years. We have 1,000,000 years. This is a thought exercise from @NerdReinvented on Instagram, who's great. He shared it in a podcast episode. I thought that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So they've gotten a chance to kind of conceptualize this. And this thought exercise carries out as follows. What if somebody then said, hey, I got an idea to spice things up a little bit. What if we roll the dice and we can play a game? And in this game, you can be born again in any mortal body, any set of circumstances, any challenges, any problems, any race, any gender, any part of the world, any set of complexities, and you can go on a journey again. Would you roll those dice? And inevitably, the students are like, yeah, definitely, right? At some point, I would roll the dice. And then we get to say, well, what if we rolled it and here we are? Yeah. Right? With our complexities and our journeys and our problems, our challenges. Mm-hmm. Through that lens, then challenge is not the problem. Mm-hmm. Not having the skills or the tools to meet challenges. That's the problem. That's the frustration. That's the anxiety driver. We don't want to live on a cloud forever doing nothing.
Yeah.
Our journeys for a reason. They're filled with barriers and obstacles for a reason. What are the tools and skills that we can use to meet those challenges and overcome those barriers? And now the students are tuned in. Now we can talk about the latest science of stress physiology, of state management, of anxiety, of stress, the way that breathing drives these critical processes in the body. Now we can talk about the neuroscience of the many ways that respiration drives brain state and physical state. And all of a sudden it has a why, it has a perspective, it has something that they can hang on to. It's actually related to them. And then we can get them actually doing some breathing. And that's the coolest thing, because in a world where there's so much data, you don't even know what to listen to or believe, they can feel the shift in their body. And that's a kind of buy-in that is it's impossible to replicate. Feeling really is, in that instance, something that they can leave, take, and leverage.
Yeah, because I'm sure you have them do the breathing exercises. Do you have them like check their heart rate, or do you have them kind of give an assessment before and after so they can do like a real time?
Yeah, we love to do that, especially a lot of kids nowadays have like an Apple Watch, or they have something that they can use. And that kind of quantified metric really does make a difference.
Yeah, because
they can lower their heart rate is a power tool.
It's not just a subjective thing. It's like, hey, actually, my heart rate did go down. It's more than just I feel this way, you feel this way. It's like, oh no, like look at my.
There's there should be this healthy skepticism. So much misinformation. The internet is your internet is different than my internet, right?
Yeah.
We love to say to young people, like, imagine as a thought exercise, you were to trade phones with somebody for the day. Now imagine that it was somebody who didn't believe the things about the world that we believe, politically, socially, or otherwise. And you'd find a whole different world in that iPhone.
Oh, sure.
You find all of these stories and algorithms and advertisements and things. So giving somebody that something that somebody can begin to trust, like the ability to change their state, it really does have such an absolute a level of buy-in immediately.
Yeah, and I think, and we'll be wrapping up soon because we're coming to the end of our time. But I think something that I've learned with everything that you said today is that breath work and breathing is like a window. It kind of gives you this, or it could be like a mirror, like you're saying with the jujitsu. You're like, I'm tapping out, I'm out. And it gave
Right.
you this window into another realm, but it also gave you a mirror back to yourself. And when you do these breathing exercises, whether it's with the athletes at your box or whether it's with the students at the school, it's almost like a very sobering kind of reality check of whether you're an athlete and you're thinking, I'm doing ultra, I've been running marathons or whatever it is. It could be anything. And then you do a simple CO2 stress tolerance test and you're like, I can't even do however long 20 days of breathing.
Right.
It's like, well, let's reassess that. Like, what, like you said, what is mental health? Well, what does it mean if you have a stress tolerance test in your mind? You're thinking, oh, well, this is no big deal. And then you do it, it's that mirror or that window where it kind of gives you insight. And I love that you're able to do that with students too, because if they can tune into our body has so much wisdom. And I think a lot of times we, either through trauma or just through culture, we're not really taught to listen to our body, or to listen and pay attention. And I
Well,
just offer that with your programs.
100%. Well, I think that if there's one thing that we want to get through in our work is that it is time for a new conversation. I think that there is, for the first time, the largest reality gap that we're going to find culturally and generationally, because the future is moving so fast. So when people say to somebody young, well, when I was your age, and we'll get ready to give some sage advice, we'll kind of point out you were never at their age. There was never this level of technological manipulation and stimulation that changes us neurologically and physiologically. It was never the type of uncertainty that we have economically. There was never such a fast changing future that adaptability became this critical skill, and that what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So one of our goals with Physiology First is to say, what is critical education in the 21st century? What should be at the foundation, not the fringes? Because you may leave school with a degree that means absolutely nothing from a viable career standpoint in 4 years. Yes. You will have state management skills. You'll understand your body and your brain, and you'll be able to navigate that when you might not have otherwise been able to. So that's why we're so driven to actually get this work into the educational space by building a national or global at this point, because anybody can access it. And we have people volunteering to translate in German. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
Where ultimately they can access these tools and they can recognize that the one thing that's worth investing in learning right now is learning about us before we attempt to learn about other things. Mm-hmm. And if we can do that, we have that skill well beyond our school years. We have it for life.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, David, that's awesome. Thank you for everything that you shared today. Please let me know and tell everybody that's watching how to find you. Where are you on social media? Where can they get a copy of your book? Where's the best place to connect with you?
Well, if you're hanging out in Freeport, Maine, you can come by the find it. It's at an undisclosed location. Hanging out in the gym and drinking a lot of good coffee and having conversations. You can just knock on the warehouse door.
There you go.
If you're on the internet, you can find us either at _distance_project. And that's a place where we really write a lot about technology, about neurology. We write about perspective. Mm-hmm. It's the place where you're going to see sort of the shared perspective that comes out of this group of people. We're talking about the future of the body, the mind, and the world. Breathe to Perform is a company that focuses on breath education. We work with schools, companies, workplaces, teams, and we work to bring breath education in hopefully a dynamic way that anybody can understand, grasp, and relate to, and that you can scale breath education and like real-time stress management tools and mental focus tools to any one of your teams. That's at Breathe to Perform. And then we're working to build, a global mental health education curriculum that puts physiology at the base of education. And that's happening Physiology First.
That's awesome. And then your book.
They can find that at Breathe to Perform. You're going to find it in the link. And, the goal with Breathe to Perform as a book was to write the simplest book on breathing ever that I've found.
Yeah.
And put it into practice in the real and natural world. So you can find it.
It's a phenomenal book. I read it, and I have my yoga certification, and you read all sorts of stuff about breath work, but this is beautiful. You get right to the point. You explain the science behind it. You give very practical tools, and it removes the intimidation. Someone might think that they have to be at a certain place or don't do all these certain things or do it for hours on end. It's like, no, actually, this is something you could do while you're sitting in a meeting or while you're in the car, or these are quick, accessible tools. So you did a great job on your book. I really enjoyed it.
I really appreciate that. One of the things I wrote in the book is that it should take like a day to read and like time to practice.
Yeah.
Read it, assimilate it. This is simple stuff. The challenge is applying it in a complex world.
Yes.
Read the book in an afternoon, spend the rest of life navigating stressful, challenging environments with a higher level of agency, and that's where the program hopefully should hit the road.
Yeah. Well, David, thanks for your time again today. I really appreciate you and all your hard work, everything that you're doing. You know that I support you. I'm just so excited for all the participants to meet you, and give him a follow. I think you guys will really enjoy what he says. He puts stuff out daily. I mean, he's on it, and he's always educating and sharing the latest science and the schools that he's going to. So again, David, thanks for everything. We appreciate you, and everyone, thanks for coming, and we'll see you the next time.
Appreciate you back, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. Take care.